You're listening to Dark Rain Chronicles. The rain hides many things, but it also remembers. Secrets washed away, voices swallowed by the storm. These are the stories it brings back, and tonight, you will hear them. Shards of violated window glittered like malevolent frost on the floorboards, biting into the soles of my bare feet as my hand, slick with sudden sweat, closed around the polished wood of the Louisville Slugger stashed by the bed. A frantic drumbeat hammered against my ribs, a rhythm of pure terror trying to obliterate the other sounds. The stealthy scrape of unfamiliar shoes, the furtive whisperings that confirmed my sanctuary had been breached. In that instant, the placid architecture of my suburban existence crumbled. Elias, that's me. Or who I was until this night. 35 years navigated with what I'd always considered a quiet sort of fortune. Steady work, a pleasant house nestled in a street where trees outnumbered anxieties, a life predictable in its gentle cadence. But standing there, swathed in darkness, the bat feeling flimsy as a reed against the unseen threat, I grasped how swiftly the illusion of safety could be pulverized. It was Wednesday, deep in the marrow of the night, somewhere past the second hour after midnight. Exhaustion from a day bled dry of energy had pulled me under early. The explosive report of shattering glass ripped me back to consciousness, my mind snagging, refusing the reality. Then, the sounds clarified. Hushed murmurs, the distinct groan of floorboards settling under weight that wasn't mine. Pure, liquid adrenaline fired through my veins. My fingers scrabbled for the phone on the nightstand, finding only cold glass and a dead screen. Forgotten charge. A silent curse formed on my lips. Gripping the bat tighter, I moved, a predator's stealth born of prey's desperation, toward the bedroom door, every sinew coiled tight. They were downstairs, in the living room. I could hear the violation in progress, the rustle and clatter of them sifting through my life. A heavy thud echoed upwards, making me flinch involuntarily. My thoughts scattered like startled birds. Confront, flee, dissolve into the shadows and pray they bypass the upper floor. Before coherency could form, footfalls ascended the stairs. They were coming. Panic, cold and sharp, threatened to suffocate, but I wrestled it down, forcing a semblance of clarity. My gaze swept the room, hunting an egress. The window overlooking the shadowed tapestry of the back garden. A drop, certainly, but survivable. With excruciating slowness, I eased the sash upward. Night air, cool and damp, rushed in, momentarily steadying my frayed nerves. I swung a leg over the sill, poised for the plunge, when a low voice materialized just outside the door. "This one," a rough whisper commanded. The brass knob began its inexorable turn. Thought evaporated. Instinct took the wheel. I surged forward as the door swung inward, channeling every ounce of fear and fury into the arc of the bat. A sickening thwack resonated, followed by a strangled cry. I didn't linger on the tableau. I vaulted over the crumpled shape blocking the threshold, nearly stumbling in my frantic momentum. Another figure stood frozen at the stair landing, eyes wide pools of shock in the dim light. For a heartbeat suspended in terror, we locked gazes. Then his hand darted to his waistband. Metal glinted. a gun. No time. I launched myself forward again, using the bat and sheer velocity to collide with him. We became a whirlwind of flailing limbs and snarled curses, gravity claiming us in a brutal cascade down the stairs. Pain detonated in my shoulder as we hit the landing below, but it was distant thunder. I scrambled upright, the polished wood of the bat gone, lost somewhere in the tangle. The front door beckoned, a promise of escape mere feet away. As I lunged for it, a third man materialized, a monolith of muscle blocking the path. He dwarfed me, built like weathered oak. Going somewhere. The voice was a low rumble, thick with menace as he advanced. Retreating, my eyes scanned frantically for another way out. Weaponless, cornered, options dwindling to zero. Then I saw it. The back door, nudged slightly open, revealing a sliver of night. Their entry point, my only chance. I feinted left, a clumsy, desperate maneuver, then pivoted hard right, ducking beneath the big man's grasping lunge. A frustrated curse followed me as I slipped past his reach. I didn't look back. Bare feet slapped against the cold kitchen tiles, propelling me towards that sliver of hope. I burst into the night, the cool, damp kiss of grass beneath my feet. The garden lay submerged in shadow, the tall boundary fence a dark rampart. Behind me, shouts erupted, the sounds of pursuit crashing through the house. Instinct propelled me towards the fence. It was high, imposing, but beside it grew the maple I'd perpetually delayed pruning. Tonight, procrastination was my unlikely savior. I scrambled up the rough bark, ignoring the stain of scrapes and tears. Just as my fingers curled over the fence's summit, a hand clamped onto my ankle like a manacle. I kicked backward, a blind, convulsive motion, feeling the satisfying thud of my heel against bone or flesh, a grunt of pain, and the grip slackened. Without pausing, I hauled myself over, tumbling inelegantly onto the far side. Agony lanced through my ankle as I landed, but I clawed my way upright. Stopping wasn't an option. I was in the adjacent yard, belonging to old Mr. Gable, a man whose existence I'd previously registered only through his periodic complaints about my music's volume, a figure I'd mentally filed under curmudgeon. Now his darkened house loomed like a fortress. I hobbled, half ran to his back door, hammering onto wood with desperate fists. "Help!" The word tore from my throat. "Please, somebody help me!" Interior lights flared to life. An eternity later, the door opened, revealing Mr. Gable, his face etched with bewildered alarm. "Elias, what in God's name?" "Please," I gasped, the words tumbling out between ragged breaths. "Let me in. Men. My house. They're after me." He pulled me inside without a word, the deadbolt sliding home with a reassuring thud. As his trembling hand reached for the telephone, we heard furious voices erupting from my own yard, the sounds of a frustrated search. The ensuing hours dissolved into a disorienting montage. Sirens wailed, painting the suburban quiet with strobing colors. A brief, sharp confrontation unfolded, the crack of gunfire splitting the night. Ultimately, 2 were apprehended. The third, the hulking figure from the hallway, had vanished into the darkness. As the adrenaline tide receded, the chilling reality washed over me. Police questions, paramedic assessments, the dispassionate cataloging of trauma. Finally, As the first fragile hints of dawn bruised the eastern sky, I was permitted back inside my violated home. Chaos reigned, drawers disgorged, furniture fractured, possessions scattered like debris after a storm. But the invisible wreckage was worse. The fundamental sense of sanctuary, of home, lay shattered alongside the window panes. Sleep became an elusive stranger in the days that followed. Every creak of the house, every unfamiliar night sound sent jolts of panic through me. They were back. The big one still out there. A phantom menace. What if he returned to finish the job? A state-of-the-art security system was installed. Steel bars fortified the windows. A handgun lay heavy in the nightstand drawer. None of it quelled the gnawing unease. The incident had burrowed deep, excavating the bedrock of my perceived security, revealing its terrifying fragility. Weeks bled into months. Slowly, painstakingly, I began the work of reclaiming my life, returning to the familiar rhythms of work, tentatively reconnecting with friends. But I was altered, warier, scanning faces in crowds, perpetually assessing threat levels. Is this one? Will you hurt me? It was an exhausting way to exist. Eventually, acknowledging the futility of fighting shadows alone, I sought help. Therapy became a space to dissect the fear, to untangle the knots of anxiety. It wasn't a swift or simple process, but gradually, the edges of the terror began to soften. I started to feel echoes of the person I was before. One afternoon, perhaps 6 months after the invasion, I encountered Mr. Gable retrieving his mail. He inquired about my well-being, genuine solicitude warming his usually gruff features. We ended up talking for over an hour right there on the sidewalk. I learned about his time in Vietnam, about the wife he'd lost years ago, how the perceived crustiness was a shield for profound loneliness. An unlikely alliance formed. Sunday coffees became routine, shared silences during televised football games comfortable. He, drawing on experiences I couldn't fathom, offered practical advice on securing my home, not as a prison, but as a protected space. A year to the month after the break-in, the news arrived. They'd apprehended the third man. He was implicated in a series of similar invasions spanning 3 states. Hearing it, I felt an immense, invisible weight lift, a burden I hadn't fully realized I carried. That night, for the first time in 12 months, I slept with the window ajar. The gentle night breeze, the familiar nocturnal symphony of crickets and distant traffic. They no longer sounded like harbingers of danger. They were simply sounds, reminders that life persists, that healing is possible, that stolen peace can be reclaimed. The violation changed me irrevocably, denying that would be foolish. Yet not all transformations were detrimental. Yes, I am more vigilant, but also more profoundly appreciative of the quiet moments, of the unexpected kindness of neighbors, of the resilient bonds of community. I no longer mistake complacency for safety, but neither do I allow fear to dictate the terms of my existence. Occasionally, an unexpected noise in the deep night still triggers that primal jolt of panic. But then I breathe. I remember I am secure. I remember I am strong. I remember I survived. And I understand that while darkness and danger are undeniable facets of the world, so too are good people, neighbors who unlock their doors in the dead of night, and improbable friendships that become anchors in the storm. Ultimately, This is the lesson I choose to salvage from that night of terror. Not the omnipresence of threat, but the surprising depths of our own resilience, and the way our most harrowing ordeals can unexpectedly illuminate the path to our better selves. The memory remains indelible. That inaugural night, the rapping began. I, Elias, was secluded in my upstairs chamber, laptop aglow upon the bed. Our dwelling was a capacious townhouse shared with Reese, Maya, and Liam. Each claimed a private room. The kitchen and living area served as common ground. 2 floors comprised the structure, my sanctuary situated on the upper level. When those initial feather-light taps materialized, I attributed them to the house's ancient plumbing, perhaps phantom echoes from the street beyond. Closing the laptop, a yawn escaping me, I courted sleep, yet the knocking persisted, a disquieting metronomic pulse against the silence. Dawn broke. My first thought was the closet, an old, built-in affair with substantial wooden doors, redolent of dust and time. A thorough inspection yielded nothing, no fissures, no trace of vermin. I circled its perimeter, rapping my own knuckle against the timber, listening for any scuttling retreat. Silence. My eyes registered the mundane contents. A small carton of documents shelved above, a pair of forgotten suitcases slumped on the floorboards. All seemed undisturbed. With a shrug, I selected my attire and proceeded with the day's rituals, soon departing for work. For a time, the disturbance remained a whisper. Sporadically, in the deep hush of night, a faint percussion would emanate from within that closet. The labyrinthine pipes behind the plaster, I reasoned. Our residence was a relic. Stairs groaned underfoot on specific treads. Floorboards lamented the wind's passage outside. Anxiety felt unwarranted. My housemates were typically downstairs or ensconced in their own rooms. Evenings often found us congregated in the living room, sharing pizza, beer, the flickering television screen. Reese once inquired if I'd perceived anything peculiar after dark, but I demurred, suggesting the sounds were likely just the building settling into its venerable bones. Yet across ensuing weeks, the noise intensified, clawing its way past dismissal. Lying on the cusp of slumber, I discerned 3, sometimes 4, rapid knocks, distinct, resonant, like knuckles lightly striking wood. A breath held captive, a strained listening. Then, utter stillness. My heartbeat would decelerate, and I'd internally reaffirm. Merely the house exhaling. One night I surfaced near 3 in the morning, abruptly awake without cause. My room lay submerged in quiet, save for the drone of the fan. Then, a muffled thump issued from the closet's interior. Heavier this time, less tentative than the soft wrappings. I lay immobilized, gaze fixed upon the closet door, a rigidity seizing my spine. My eyes darted to the handle. Stationary. A wave of forced calm washed over me. Perhaps an object dislodged from the shelf. But morning's inspection revealed everything precisely as it had been. Eventually, talk turned to relocation. Maya and Liam sought a smaller apartment together. Reese had secured employment in another city. Our disparate schedules rendered the townhouse cavernous, echoing with unused space. I, however, opted to remain. The arrangement with the landlord was favorable. The proximity to my workplace ideal. Solitude, I mused, might prove a welcome shift. This was before the knocking found its voice. Their departure draped the nights in a profounder silence, a deeper solitude. I'd occupy the downstairs living room, television casting shifting shadows, yet an insistent urge propelled me to peer around every corner. The space felt vast, dimly illuminated by a solitary floor lamp. Kitchen lights remained extinguished, an exercise in frugality. The corridor leading to the staircase acquired a nocturnal strangeness. I'd always illuminate it before ascending, each footfall coaxing a creak from the time-worn planks. The house seeming to sigh around me. The closet's wrapping persisted some nights, though usually subdued. Then, approximately a week into my solitary tenancy, insomnia claimed me. Restlessness coiled tight within, thoughts snagged on work deadlines and personal anxieties. I lay supine, staring into the ceiling's geography, the fan whirring its monotonous tune. Midsummer heat clung stubbornly to the room. Lacking air conditioning, relief came only from an open window and the fan's meager efforts. Around 2 in the morning, it began, soft tapping from the closet, measured, unhurried, as if someone sought gentle attention. Adrenaline surged, a cold knot tightening in my gut, my throat constricting. I fought to disregard it, but the taps grew more deliberate, insistent. I sat upright, sheets clinging damply. The thought of illumination flickered, but instead, I moved with stealth towards the closet door, the floorboards emitting soft protests beneath my weight. Pressing my ear flat against the wood, breath suspended, I heard it, faint rapping directly on the other side, like knuckles, yet possessing an unnerving delicacy. My hand closed around the doorknob, a slight tremor betraying my resolve. Slowly, I turned it. The door groaned open. In that instant, a current of frigid air brushed my face, startlingly cool, akin to a refrigerated room, though no such appliance existed in the house. It compelled me backward. My eyes probed the shadowed interior. Activating my phone's flashlight, I swept its beam across shelves and suitcases. No movement. I waved a hand into the space, searching for the source of the draft. But the chill was ephemeral, dissipating within seconds, replaced by the familiar humid air. Retreating, I secured the door and perched on the bed's edge, heart hammering against my ribs. I rubbed my palms against my knees, seeking composure. Sleep remained elusive. I watched the closet door until the 6:00 a.m. alarm shattered the vigil. Rising, showering, I attempted to cleanse myself of the night's strangeness. The subsequent days passed uneventfully, yet an unease lingered within my room. Entering, my gaze invariably snagged on the closet. The memory of that inexplicable coldness persisted. I re-examined the closet walls, the back panel, the sides. No gaps, no vents, no conceivable conduit to the exterior. I checked the hallway walls beyond. All appeared solid. Relating the incident to a colleague elicited only a shrug. Old houses harbor odd drafts, he offered, unconcerned. A few nights later, engrossed in a show on my laptop, nearing midnight, I paused. Knocking drifted down from upstairs. Not loud, but unmistakable. Knuckles on wood, again. 4 or 5 impacts. A pause, then another sequence. My stomach clenched. Lowering the laptop's volume, I listened intently. The knocks persisted. Rising, I exited the living room, ascending the stairs with deliberate slowness, pulse accelerating, a fine sheen of sweat prickling my forehead. The hallway light blazed. My bedroom door stood ajar. As I crossed the threshold, the knocking ceased. The closet door remained shut, exactly as I had left it. I approached, hand hovering over the knob. A moment's hesitation. Did I truly wish to open it again? My palms felt clammy, my breathing shallow. Turning the knob, I swung the door wide. The familiar stale scent met my nostrils, but no cold air this time, just stuffy darkness. Phone light slicing through the gloom, I scanned the shelf, shifted documents, peered behind suitcases. I even tapped the back panel experimentally. Nothing seemed amiss. Listening acutely yielded only silence. I closed the door, hands trembling slightly, tension knotting my neck. Returning downstairs, concentration shattered. I abandoned the show, feeling jumpy, hyper-aware. Over the next fortnight, I endeavored to normalize the intrusions, but the knocks became an unwelcome fixture of my nightly existence. Sometimes brief, other times drawn out for a full minute. I'd lie rigid in bed, eyes locked on that impassive closet door, anticipating something. Imagination offered lurid scenarios I fought to suppress. When retrieving clothes became necessary, the process was swift. Open, grab, shut. I began utilizing the hallway closet more, avoiding the bedroom one whenever feasible. One afternoon, determination spurred me to action. I evacuated the closet entirely. Documents were boxed on my bed. Suitcases dragged out, their emptiness confirmed, save for brittle papers and stray receipts. After removing them from the room, I commenced a tactile examination of the interior wood panels, tapping, probing for hollow spaces. Old, yes, but fundamentally sound. No apertures, no rodent evidence. Armed with a screwdriver, I attempted to loosen a corner of the back panel, hoping to glimpse behind it, but the rusted nails held fast. The panel resisted without threatening significant damage. It wasn't my property to dismantle. Alone with my escalating apprehension that afternoon, though no sounds occurred, the memory of the knocking was a palpable presence. That evening, around 11, a steady thumping resonated from the closet. Louder now, like determined knuckles. 3 raps, a pause, 3 more. My pulse leaped. Heat flushed my face. A tremor ran through my legs. I advanced to the door, hand resting on the knob as the rhythmic knocking continued, gentle yet insistent. Sweat trickled down my spine. In one decisive movement, I flung the door open, flashlight beam stabbing into the void. Only bare wood met my gaze. I stepped back, leaving the door ajar. A heavy silence descended, the air neither cold nor warm, just still. I stood there listening, my own breathing loud in the quiet. After a minute, I reached in and tapped the inner wall myself. No response. I tapped again. Nothing. That night, I slept with the closet door gaping open, a desperate attempt to witness whatever transpired, to catch the phenomenon in the act. Lights extinguished, I settled into bed, watching the darkness morph familiar shapes into suspect silhouettes. Hours crawled by as I waited, hyper-vigilant for the knocks. Eventually, exhaustion claimed me. Morning arrived, the closet silent and unchanged. My final month in the townhouse stretched into an eternity. Each evening followed a lonely pattern. Return from work, microwave dinner, solitary television viewing. My nerves remained frayed. The vast, empty house amplified every incidental sound. A clang from the plumbing would send me bolting upright, convinced it originated from the closet. I took to sleeping with a small lamp burning. Earplugs were tried, then discarded. The inability to monitor my surroundings felt more terrifying. The knock showed no sign of abating. Some nights faint, others startlingly loud. One instance around 4:00 a.m. banished sleep entirely. I stared at the ceiling until dawn painted the window gray. Towards the month's end, the landlord informed me of a prospective tenant. He offered an early departure, an offer I readily accepted. Boxes were packed, friends summoned to assist with loading a small moving truck. On my last night, I lay alone in the denuded bedroom, bed frame gone, only a sleeping bag cushioning me from the floor. The closet stood empty, documents and suitcases already transported. Perhaps now, I reasoned, with the closet cleared, the knocking would cease. But near midnight, a soft tap echoed from within its hollow space, amplified by the room's emptiness. My heart hammered, yet I made no move to investigate. I simply stared at the closed door for a long, silent interval. The following morning, I left the keys upon the kitchen table. A final ascent, a last look into the vacant bedroom. The closet door was shut. The house was utterly still. A residual unease clung to me, yet overshadowed by an immense relief. Locking the door behind me, I drove away. My new residence is a smaller apartment, nestled in a different neighborhood. Quiet prevails here. A simple bedroom, a functional kitchen, and blessedly, no built-in closet of that nature. Since relocating, the knocking has not returned. Occasionally, late at night, my thoughts drift back to that old closet. The relentless taps, the phantom cold, the knot of tension constricting my chest whenever I stood before that door. No explanation ever surfaced. I possess only the memory of sound and sensation. Gratitude for my departure remains potent. That is the extent of it. It was a period steeped in disquiet, when I have no desire to revisit. The night the silhouette coalesced at my bed's end, certainty settled deep in my marrow. This was no trick of failing sight. 83 orbits around the sun had shown me marvels and horrors, yet none primed me for the existential dread awaiting within Willow Creek Manor's quiet walls. That singular night frayed the tapestry I'd woven of life, death, and the gossamer division between realities. I am Arthur Pendleton, a tenant of Willow Creek Manor these past 5 years. It's a tolerable berth, truth be told. Sustenance arrives warm, the attendants offer gentle hands, and a few kindred spirits share the slow current of days. Still, an undeniable melancholy seeps through the floorboards here, a collective quietude as we mark time, observing the gradual dimming of companions, the emptying of chairs at dinner. Morbidity was never my companion. I preferred the distraction of yellowed pages from the modest library, the feel of damp earth in the communal garden plots, the spinning of yarns from brighter decades to any ear willing to bend. But a subtle shift had begun. Trifles, initially. A book migrating across a table untouched, sudden pockets of unnatural chill invading my room's warmth, susurrations in the corridor when solitude was certain. Senescence, I'd murmur, blaming the wearing gears of age. Yet a deeper instinct, primal and insistent, whispered otherwise. The pivotal night arrived under the guise of early rest. My joints, those traitors, screamed with arthritic fire, driving me beneath the covers in search of oblivion. Sleep claimed me swiftly, only to relinquish its hold abruptly. A peculiar awareness snagged me from slumber. The undeniable pressure of observation, a prickling sentience crawling up the spine, raising the fine hairs along my arms. My eyelids flew open to a paralysis that stole breath and motion. There, framed against the gloom at my bed's terminus, stood a presence. Scant illumination bled from my digital clock, yet its silhouette was stark, humanoid, utterly immobile, observing. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum threatening rupture. A cry lodged itself, a solid thing, in my throat. Immobilized by terror, I lay captive to its silent vigil. Time elongated, stretching seconds into brittle eternities during our soundless confrontation. Then, a slow, inexorable drift began. Not walking, no. A gliding, fluid and silent, carrying it around to my bedside. Proximity revealed more unsettling details. Its stature defied human norms, unnaturally tall. Its form seemed to vibrate, edges indistinct, as if woven from shadow and moonlight, not quite corporeal. But the face, with a stark negation of it, plunged me into abyssal fear. Where features ought to have resided, there was only a seamless, vacant smoothness. I clenched my eyes tight, a desperate plea forming in my mind. Vanish. Yet I felt its imminence intensify, the ambient air leaching warmth with its approach. Unable to bear the suspense, I forced my lids apart. It loomed directly above, that featureless void mere inches from my own face. Then, compounding the horror, a mouth materialized. A dark, impossible fissure, splitting the blankness, stretching wider than anatomy should permit. It spoke. The sound was a sibilant whisper, seeming to emanate from the very air, from the corners of the room, from within my own skull. Arthur. It breathed, my name warped, alien on its non-existent tongue. It is time. In that instant, some internal dam shattered. The ice of paralysis cracked, releasing my voice. A scream tore from my lungs, a raw sound louder than I imagined my aged bellows could produce, as I thrashed against the sheets. The presence recoiled, appearing almost startled by the sudden violence of my terror. It retreated, dissolving back into the room's deepest shadows as swiftly as it had manifested. Corridor lights blazed, urgent footfalls drummed closer. My door flew inward, admitting 2 night attendants, concern stark on their faces. "Mr. Pendleton," one queried, rushing to my side. "Are you quite well?" Tremors racked my frame. Cold perspiration drenched my nightclothes. It was here, I managed, breath ragged, gesturing toward the space it had occupied. A presence, observing. It spoke. The nurses shared a glance, fleeting but eloquent, the familiar dismissal reserved for the sadly bewildered elder. One offered a placating pat to my hand. "It's all right now, Mr. Pendleton. A bad dream, that's all. No one's here besides us." But the certainty remained, cold and hard in my gut. This was no phantom of sleep. The ensuing days blurred into a haze of solicitous observation. Staff monitored me closely, their hushed tones carrying fragments. Sundowning, cognitive disturbance. Fellow residents offered a cautious distance, as if my experience were an ailment one might catch. Yet my conviction held. I was not unraveling. Something unearthly had breached my room. Tentative attempts at research floundered. My gnarled fingers wrestled clumsily with the community room's computer keyboard, and the library yielded nothing pertinent to spectral visitations. I was adrift. Nightfall transformed into a crucible of anxiety. Sleep became a shallow, guarded state. Every floorboard groaned, every fleeting shadow catapulting my pulse into frantic rhythm. Occasionally, a peripheral flicker, tall, luminous, would tease my vision, only to evaporate upon direct gaze. A week elapsed since the visitation. I awoke near the deepest hour of night to find my room bathed in an unnatural, pallid luminescence. And there, occupying its previous station at my bed's foot, stood the presence. This time, however, it was not solitary. Orbiting it like spectral satellites were other forms, translucent, vaguely human contours shimmering with the same faint internal light. A shock of recognition coursed through me. These were faces from Willow Creek's past, souls I had known who had since departed. Mrs. Gable, remembered for slipping me clandestine second helpings of pudding. Mr. Rossi, my erstwhile chess adversary. And dear God, could it be? Alara, my Alara, gone these 2 long years. The central figure lifted an arm, a slow gesture encompassing the luminous assembly. When it spoke, the sound retained its ethereal whisper, yet now, paradoxically, it carried less raw terror. They await your company, Arthur, it intoned. It is time you join their ranks. My gaze found Alara. Her cherished features smiled across the ethereal divide, radiating the warmth of 6 decades lived side by side. A profound yearning surged, to reach for her hand, to shed this weary vessel of aches and solitude. Yet another current flowed stronger within me, a deep-rooted insistence on remaining. No, I uttered, the word trembling slightly but resonant with resolve. Not yet. My time here isn't finished. The entity inclined its head, a gesture suggesting puzzlement. The surrounding spirits seemed to waver, their faint smiles dissolving into sorrow. Alara offered a silent kiss across the space between worlds, before she, and then the others, dissolved like mist. Only the primary presence lingered, observing me from its impassive void. You are unexpected, Arthur, it whispered. Few elect to linger when the passage is offered. A flicker of my old defiance sparked. Well, I countered, voice gaining strength. I've always been a stubborn old mule. Anyone here could tell you that. To my astonishment, a sound rippled from it, like shattered glass carried on a sudden breeze. A laugh. So be it, the whisper returned. But understand, my next arrival will brook no refusal. And then it vanished, plunging the room back into ordinary darkness, the pale light extinguished. I was left alone with the frantic rhythm of my own breathing. Dawn found me infused with an unfamiliar clarity, a renewed sense of purpose. My remaining time might be a dwindling resource, but damn it all, I would invest it richly. I threw myself into hallway chats, offered my stories more freely, even began painstakingly chronicling my life's meandering path, determined to etch some record onto the page. Each night now, as sleep beckons, I issue a quiet declaration into the shadows. Not this night. I am not prepared. And sometimes, faintly, I fancy I hear that strange, crystalline laughter in reply. I cannot know when the presence will return. Perhaps tomorrow's twilight, perhaps a year from now. The uncertainty remains, but the fear has receded, replaced by a quiet readiness. When the absolute, undeniable summons arrives, I will face it. I will take that offered passage and seek Alara and the others who wait beyond the veil. Until that moment, however, there is living yet to embrace, and not even the final darkness itself will hurry me along. The city had wrung me out, leaving a residue of fatigue that clung heavier than the late-night humidity. Escape, even for a moment, felt essential. I sought refuge in a station lavatory, one of those neglected alcoves few ever troubled. Emptiness reigned. The vast concourse beyond offered only the occasional punctuation of solitary footsteps fading into the vaulted dimness. Midnight loomed, perhaps already past, and the profound quiet was a balm. All I craved was the shock of cold water, a brief ablution to rinse away the day's accumulated grime. Inside, the air hung thick and still. Fluorescent tubes overhead sputtered erratically, painting the cracked tilework in strokes of sickly light and dancing shadow. A low, insistent buzzing emanated from them, the only sound disturbing the near absolute silence. Seeking privacy, I slipped into a stall, the latch clicking shut with unnerving loudness. I sagged against the cool metal door, eyes closed, attempting to will the world away. That's when I heard it, a subtle disturbance, the barest whisper of movement just outside, like fabric sighing against the floor. My senses snapped taut, listening intently into the charged quiet. But a sound evaporated as swiftly as it had arisen, leaving only the electric hum. Someone else seeking solitude, perhaps equally drained. I let the tension ebb, sinking back against the door, eyelids heavy. Then, distinctly, a slow, abrasive scrape. The sound of something solid, something unyielding, being dragged across the grimy floor tiles, unnervingly close. My eyes flew open. A frantic percussion started against my ribs. Lowering my gaze, I scanned the gap beneath the stall door, seeing nothing but the stained, worn floor. Yet the scraping persisted, rhythmic, deliberate, drawing nearer with agonizing slowness. My fists clenched involuntarily. I held my breath, praying for invisibility, desperate not to betray my presence. Through the narrow space, a shadow detached itself from the ambient gloom, stretching, inching closer. Suddenly, breaching the threshold beneath the door, a small circle of glass materialized. Unmistakable. A camera lens held firm by unseen fingers pressed flat against the tile, aimed directly upwards. Bile surged into my throat. My heart hammered, a frantic drumbeat I felt sure must be audible. Thought fragmented. What now? Silence seemed the only defense, a refusal to acknowledge the violation. Yet fear, cold and sharp, clawed its way upwards. Trembling, I drew my feet off the floor, pressing my back hard against the stall's partition, trying to become impossibly small, impossibly still. The lens remained unblinking patient, its glassy stare a silent interrogation, waiting for a reaction I refused to give. An eternity seemed to crawl by before the lens finally withdrew, vanishing back into the shadows beyond the door. A ragged, shaky breath escaped me. My hands, slick with sweat, gripped the stall walls for support. I waited, straining to hear any footstep, any rustle of clothing, any sign of departure. Nothing. Only the oppressive silence, thick with implication. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, I wrestled with indecision. The thought of opening the door, of confronting whatever waited on the other side, was paralyzing. But remaining caged felt equally untenable. With excruciating care, moving like a wraith, I turned the lock. The mechanism's click echoed disproportionately in the stillness. Pushing the door open a mere fraction, I peered through the slit. The lavatory appeared deserted, bathed in the same flickering, unreliable light. The buzzing hummed on. Taking a hesitant step out onto the tiles, I scanned the room, pulse still erratic. Then, a shift in the deepest shadows by the far wall, near the sinks. A figure stood there, partially obscured, utterly motionless, watching. I couldn't discern features, only the stark outline against the gloom, the rigid posture of observation. My stomach plummeted as I registered the object in their hand. A phone, its screen faintly luminous, angled towards me, recording. A wave of visceral dread washed over me, rooting my feet to the spot. "Run!" my mind screamed. "Flee!" Yet I remained frozen, locked in a silent standoff with the watcher. Then, without preamble, the figure glided forward, detaching itself from the shadows. For a fleeting instant, I saw a face, pale, devoid of expression, with eyes that seemed to penetrate straight through me. No word, no sound, just another deliberate step closer, their focus unwavering. Adrenaline finally broke the paralysis. I spun, raw instinct taken over, and launched myself towards the exit. My shoes slapped against the tiles, the sound amplified in the enclosed space. Behind me, I heard footsteps commence, not hurried, but steady, unyielding, the pace of someone utterly confident in their pursuit. I crashed through the lavatory door and into the echoing emptiness of the station concourse, eyes darting wildly, searching for any sign of life, any potential witness or savior. The platform stretched away, deserted under the weak glow of the overhead lights. Only the distant, receding whine of a departed train disturbed the quiet. I didn't cease running until I burst out onto the street, the cool night air rasping in my lungs. I risked a glance backward, half expecting the figure to be right behind me. Nothing. Just the station entrance, dark and impassive, swallowing the secret of what had transpired within. My pocket vibrated. I flinched violently, heart leaping anew. Pulling out my phone with trembling fingers, I saw the notification. One new message. Unknown sender. A cold premonition snaked down my spine as I opened it. The words glowed starkly on the screen. "Nice to see you." Nausea churned within me. How? Who? The anonymity was terrifying. The implied intimacy even more so. I felt their gaze still upon me, somehow transmitted through the indifferent pixels. I deleted the message, powered down the phone, and began the walk home, each footstep heavy, every shadow a potential threat, the feeling of being watched clinging to me like like a second skin. Sleep that night was a fraught, shallow affair. Every creak of the building, every siren wailing in the distance, morphed into the stalker's approach. I checked the door locks repeatedly, peered through the blinds at the empty street below, yet the sensation of unseen eyes persisted, a constant, unnerving pressure. Days bled into one another. I tried to rationalize, to dismiss it as a singular, disturbing encounter, a random act of intimidation. Then, another message arrived, again from an unknown number. This time, an image, a photograph of me, captured from behind, walking down a familiar street, oblivious. Raw terror surged through me. My hands shook as I stared at my own unaware form. They were still out there, following, observing. How? The intrusions became relentless, each message a calculated turn of the screw. More photos. Me at a cafe, waiting for a bus, glimpses through my own apartment window. Texts detailing my clothing, my destinations, snippets of conversations overheard. My grip on reality felt tenuous. Every passing stranger became suspect. Every flicker of movement in my peripheral vision, a potential threat. I reported it, showed the police the escalating digital harassment. Sympathy, but no solutions. Not enough evidence, they said. I changed my number. I moved. I altered my commute, my habits, desperately trying to sever the invisible tether. It made no difference. The messages always found me, each one a chilling affirmation. Escape was an illusion. They were watching, always watching. Even now, penning these words, my phone buzzes beside me. Another notification illuminates the screen. Another message has arrived. A dissonance hummed beneath the surface the instant I crossed the threshold of that residence. A wrong note in the opulent silence. But need gnaws logic thin, obscures the blatant omens flickering at the periphery. Weeks I'd spent trawling the digital depths for house-sitting arrangements, seeking sanctuary while charting a new course, when the advertisement for the Sterling place materialized. It beckoned like a mirage, a palatial suburban dwelling, generous compensation, a mere weekend's commitment. I vaulted at the prospect, submitting my details before doubt could whisper caution. The Sterlings themselves proved superficially cordial upon our meeting, though an undercurrent of distraction pulled at them. Mrs. Sterling, statuesque with meticulously architected hair, conducted a breathless circuit of the premises, while Mr. Sterling, a severe figure encased in costly fabric, orbited nearby. Leo's already tucked in, Mrs. Sterling offered, a nod towards their 5-year-old son. He's unlikely to stir, but his room's location is familiar, should he require anything. I affirmed, recalling a previous brief babysitting stint, yet an odd inflection in her voice snagged my attention. Anxiety radiated from her, a subtle tremor beneath the porcelain stillness of her features. One additional item, Mr. Sterling interjected, guiding me towards a sophisticated tablet integrated into the living room wall. We've enhanced our security apparatus. This console provides access to all camera feeds. Surprise flickered through me. Cameras. No such surveillance existed before. Mrs. Sterling emitted a laugh, high and fragile like spun sugar. Ah, the times we live in. Prudence is paramount. Simply maintain vigilance, won't you? It offers us immense peace of mind, knowing you're observing. Before further inquiry could form, they vanished in a cloud of expensive perfume and clipped farewells. Silence descended upon the house, profound save for the low, electronic thrum of the omnipresent security system. I drifted into the kitchen, liberating a cold drink from the refrigerator's gleaming interior. The wall-mounted tablet drew my gaze, its screen a mosaic displaying segmented views of the property. Most remained inert, cloaked in shadow. The manicured rear lawn, the vacant driveway, the upper corridor. As I took a swallow, my phone vibrated. A text message from an unrecognized source. I observe you're acclimating well. I stiffened, ice water flooding my veins. How could such knowledge be possessed? My eyes darted towards the tablet's grid of lenses, a sudden, acute sense of exposure washing over me. With tremulous digits, I composed a reply. Identify yourself. The retort was nearly instantaneous. An ally, monitoring the situation, as you are. My heart hammered against my ribs as I scanned the empty expanse of the room. Was this some elaborate prank? A test orchestrated by the Sterlings? Another message arrived. The azure jumper suits you. My gaze dropped to my torso in stunned confirmation. I was, indeed, clad in blue. Whoever this correspondent was, they possessed a direct line of sight. Where are you? I typed, my hands betraying my fear. How are you seeing me? I possess certain advantages, came the enigmatic answer. But rest assured, my intent is not harm. It is warning. Alarm bells clamored within my skull. Flee, a voice urged. Contact the authorities. Alert the Sterlings. Simply evacuate this place. Yet a morbid fascination, intertwined with undeniable fear, held me captive. Warn me regarding what? I queried. A significant pause stretched before the subsequent message materialized. The Sterlings are not the individuals they portray. This house harbors danger. Remain alert. A profound chill traced its path down my spine. I was poised to demand clarification when a sound emanated from the upper floor. A soft concussion, as if an object of some weight had been gently deposited. My breath hitched. Leo was meant to be asleep, and I was ostensibly alone. Wasn't I? I crept towards the staircase, my pulse thundering, a drumbeat surely audible in the stillness. The security tablet snagged my attention as I passed, and I halted, transfixed by shock. The camera feed from Leo's room depicted an empty bed, the linens disturbed. Where was he? My phone buzzed anew. Investigate the attic. Attic? The walkthrough hadn't included such a space. Yet upon reaching the landing, my eyes fell upon a slender door tucked away at the hallway's terminus, previously overlooked. Every instinct screamed retreat, urging me to abandon the house and its secrets forever. But the image of Leo, potentially imperiled. I couldn't forsake him. With hands that shook, I grasped the doorknob. It yielded without resistance, unveiling a precipitous flight of stairs ascending into blackness. Hello, I ventured softly, my voice a fragile thread. Leo, are you present? Silence answered, thick and oppressive. Drawing a ragged breath, I commenced the ascent, my phone's beam cleaving the darkness. The stairs groaned ominously beneath my weight, each creak amplified in the profound quiet. Nearing the summit, shapes began to resolve in the gloom. Stacked cartons, furniture shrouded in dust cloths, and there, sequestered in the furthest corner, a diminutive form huddled beneath a covering. "Leo," I whispered, relief surging through me. "It's all right. You can emerge. What prompted you to come up here?" The figure remained motionless, unresponsive. A tendril of disquiet coiled in my gut as I drew nearer. Gently extending a hand, I drew back the covering and gasped, recoiling. Not Leo. It was a doll, life-sized, its realism uncanny and disturbing. Glassy orbs stared blankly upwards, a painted smile eternally fixed upon its porcelain visage. My phone pulsed again, startling me violently. Trembling, I read the new message. "Now you perceive. Depart while the opportunity exists." Panic ignited, a wildfire consuming reason. I spun to flee, only to find my exit obstructed. Mr. Sterling occupied the stairwell's apex, his countenance indecipherable in the dim illumination. "I find myself disappointed, Anya," he stated, his tone glacial. "Our instructions were elementary. Your sole duty was to monitor the cameras." Mrs. Sterling materialized beside him. Leo clutched firmly in her grasp. The boy's eyes were wide with fright, his mouth obscured by his mother's immaculately manicured hand. "We cannot permit you to disseminate narratives," Mrs. Sterling murmured, her veneer of civility cracking to expose something flinty and merciless beneath. A genuine pity. We harbored such elevated expectations. I retreated, my thoughts scrambling for purchase. An escape route, a means of evasion. Surely one existed, but I was ensnared, cornered in this dusty repository with no passage past them. Why? The word tore from my throat. What is the meaning of this? Mr. Sterling offered a smile devoid of warmth. "Let us merely state we possess particular inclinations, and we necessitate an individual to accommodate them, an individual whose absence would go unremarked." The horrific weight of his implications struck me with physical force. This wasn't some bizarre charade or evaluation. It was profoundly more sinister. In that instant of stark realization, primal survival took command. I lunged, exploiting their momentary surprise, slipping past Mr. Sterling, shoving him off balance as I hurtled down the stairs. Behind me, shouts erupted, the heavy cadence of pursuit thundering in my wake. I sprinted through the house, propelled by the singular objective of reaching the front door, reaching freedom. My hand closed on the doorknob just as a searing pain pierced my shoulder. A cry escaped me, vision swimming as I faltered. Whatever substance they'd administered acted with terrifying speed. The room tilted, and the floor rushed up to meet me. The final image imprinted on my consciousness, before darkness claimed me, was Mrs. Sterling's face hovering above, etched with that same frigid smile. "Pleasant dreams, Anya," she whispered. "When you awaken, the true entertainment commences." How long consciousness eluded me remains uncertain. When awareness returned, it was to a compact windowless chamber. My head throbbed fiercely. My mouth felt arid, packed with cotton. As my vision gradually adjusted to the dim light, I discerned other forms, figures slumped against the walls or curled upon meager pallets. My phone was absent, yet a familiar contour in my pocket ignited a fragile ember of hope. They had overlooked the small canister of pepper spray, my constant companion, I cannot say how long I remained there, marshaling my strength, awaiting an opening. But when it presented itself, a fleeting lapse in vigilance as they introduced another captive, I was poised. The subsequent moments dissolved into a maelstrom of adrenaline and instinct. The pepper spray afforded precious seconds, sufficient time to evade my captors and navigate my way out of what I now understood to be a subterranean level. I burst forth into the bruised light of pre-dawn, gasping the untainted air as I ran. I didn't cease my flight until I stumbled upon a petrol station several miles distant, where, finally, I summoned the authorities. The aftermath unfolded in a disorienting vortex of interrogations, official inquiries, and incredulity. The Sterlings were apprehended, their meticulously crafted facade disintegrating beneath the accumulated evidence. Other victims surfaced, individuals who had vanished months prior. As for myself, the task of reconciling the ordeal continues. The faith I once placed in others, in the simple generosity of lending aid, lies shattered. Every request for assistance now resonates with potential menace. Every amiable countenance, a possible guise for darkness. Yet, I endured, and in doing so, played a part in dismantling an operation that inflicted immeasurable harm. It is a meager consolation, yet something to clutch as I endeavor to reconstruct my existence, my belief in the possibility of good. Though the next time my phone signals an incoming message from an unknown sender, I believe I shall simply cast the device aside. That millennia-old vessel of Nile clay had absolutely no business relocating itself. Yet, the grainy security feed before Elias played out the undeniable heresy. Frame by digital frame, the urn slid, untouched by any visible hand. Ice didn't just trace his veins, it flooded them. He couldn't fathom it then, how this silent, impossible pirouette would unravel the night, fraying the very fabric between the tangible now and the dust of ages. For half a year, Elias had haunted the Municipal Museum's shadowed corridors, a nocturnal guardian trading silence for study hours. The position suited his postgraduate existence, a quiet harbor amidst the demanding tides of anthropological theory. His nightly ritual, circuits through echoing halls, a scan of the electronic eyes, then immersion in forgotten cultures via textbook pages. Battling sleep was typically the shift's most formidable phantom, until this particular descent of darkness rewrote the terms of his vigil. The evening commenced under the guise of normalcy. 10 o'clock saw him trade weary pleasantries with the departing dayman before embarking on his initial patrol. Silence reigned supreme within the museum's vaulting spaces, a profound quiet punctuated only by the hum of climate control. Artifacts slumbered, skeletal shapes stretching long, distorted limbs under the weak glow of safety lamps. He'd believed himself acclimated to this inherent spectral quality, a fool's comfort soon to be shattered. Midnight tolled somewhere beyond the thick museum walls. Elias, eyes scanning the mosaic of monitors, felt a flicker of wrongness snag his attention. Screen 4, trained on the heart of the Egyptian collection, displayed the celebrated canopic urn, 4 millennia etched into its fired clay surface. And it had jittered, a phantom inch perhaps, nudging leftward. He blinked, scrubbing at his eyelids, then spooled the recording back. the digital ghost reappeared. Frame A, the urn stood sentinel in its designated coordinates. Frame B, it occupied a fractionally different space. Unmistakable. Impossible, Elias breathed, the word a dry rasp in the stillness. He knew that display intimately. The heft of the artifact, the impregnable shield of its vitrine, the precise geometry of its placement. Gravity and inertia were constants. Ancient pottery did not simply decide to relocate. Logic dictated a technological specter, a mere hiccup in the surveillance matrix. Yes, a camera fault. That had to be it. He pushed back his chair, the scrape loud in the quiet, resolved to confirm the mundane explanation. Yet, drawing near the threshold of the Nile wing, a palpable disquiet settled upon him. The very air grew thick, viscous, humming with a latent energy reminiscent of ozone before a lightning strike. Inside, the gallery presented an initial tableau of stillness. There, upon its plinth, rested the urn, looking deceptively benign, its complex scriptwork, prayers and protections, absorbing the ambient gloom. But as Elias advanced, his breath catching, the truth struck him cold. It had moved. The painted Wadjet eye, the vigilant Horus gaze that always held the room's center, was now canted fractionally askew, peering towards the western shadows. A glacial tremor ran the length of his spine. He had been so certain. October breathed chill whispers against the window panes the Tuesday evening. The Chronos began its rebellion. Curled deep within my living room's worn leather embrace, adrift in the sterile glow of work emails, I was abruptly snagged from my digital drift by silence. Not mere quiet, but the sudden, jagged cessation of the great clock's resonant chime. A soundscape that had measured my life here for 15 years. Its voice fractured mid-declaration. My gaze lifted, drawn irresistibly to the towering sentinel of polished rosewood. Frozen, its brass hands pointed accusatorially at 11:58 p.m. A temporal dissonance, startling against the 7:43 p.m., displayed on my phone's stark screen. Rising, I crossed the room, the familiar floorboards groaning softly underfoot. The glass guarding the clock's face felt cool as I swung it open. Beneath my fingers, the ornate hands yielded, metallic and indifferent, as I nudged them towards the present moment. The steady, rhythmic pulse, the house's heartbeat, resumed the instant the door clicked shut. I retreated to my emails. Yet scarcely 20 minutes had dissolved before the chimes erupted anew. Midnight's toll, sharp and premature. A frown creased my brow. My phone confirmed 8:03 p.m. The clock, defiant, once again proclaimed the witching hour. Mechanical failing, surely. A task for the morning. A call to the specialist. I reset the time once more, my attention now snagged by the intricate dance of gears visible through the mechanism's window. 3 generations this clock had watched over, a legacy passed from my grandfather to my father, and finally to me when Dad decamped to Florida's sun-drenched languor. Its meticulous upkeep had been my quiet duty, serviced biannually by a man whose life revolved around such precise instruments. Never, until now, had it faltered. Dawn revealed the clock arrested again at midnight, but something else snagged my eye, a detail overlooked in the dim evening light. Faint etches, like spidery threads, marring the smooth expanse of the clock face. They hadn't been there yesterday. Of this, I was certain. Not deep gouges, but definite, deliberate seaming marks, clustering unnervingly around the Roman numeral twin. My fingertip traced their subtle indentation, a violation of the polished surface. I telephoned the horologist downtown, Mr. Abernathy, the elderly artisan who knew the clock's inner workings intimately. My description, the temporal leaps, the nascent scratches, elicited a perplexed silence before he agreed to a visit the following day. That night became a vigil. Laptop humming on the low table, a potent brew of coffee steaming beside me. I settled in, anticipating tedious hours of work, punctuated by observation. The hands swept their ordained paths with perfect regularity till 11:57 p.m. Then the cadence shifted. The familiar tick-tock deepened, grew ponderous, heavy as footsteps pacing decaying attic stairs. A shiver traced my spine. Gooseflesh prickled my arms as the room's ambient warmth seemed to leach away, replaced by a sudden crypt chill. With agonizing slowness, the minute hand crawled towards its zenith. At 11:59, the pendulum's arc turned erratic. Its dependable swing dissolved into a drunken stagger, wide, then shallow, then wide again. The sound warped too, shedding its rhythmic comfort for a grating, scraping noise that set my teeth on edge, a sound like stone grating on bone. My hands clenched the chair's arms, eyes locked on the unfolding strangeness. The second hand spasmed, jerking its way around the dial. As it finally touched 12, no chime followed. Instead, a shriek tore through the room, thin and sharp as fingernails dragged across slate. The hands spun violently backward, a counterclockwise blur, finally shuddering to a halt once more at midnight. I surged to my feet, heart hammering against my ribs, and approached the silent giant. Fresh scratches scarred the face, deeper now, forming a pattern that hinted at language, yet resembled no script I knew. My hand trembled as I reached out. The glass felt colder than ice. I snatched my fingers back, retreating a step. Though the pendulum hung motionless, a low, resonant hum emanated from within the rosewood case, a vibration that resonated in my dental fillings. The very air around the clock seemed to shimmer, distorting like heat haze on summer asphalt. The remainder of the night I spent huddled on the sofa, watching the clock across the room. It remained locked at midnight, the unsettling hum a constant presence, until the first blush of dawn, when it abruptly ceased. The clock resumed its normal function, ticking placidly as if nothing untoward had occurred. Mr. Abernathy arrived punctually at 9. He was a compact man peering through thick spectacles, his hands possessing the delicate certainty of years spent coaxing life into intricate mechanisms. While I recounted the previous night's bizarre performance, he scrutinized the clock face. "These marks," he murmured, adjusting his glasses, his voice hushed. "Highly irregular. The pattern, it suggests they originated from inside the clockwork." "Impossible," I countered. "There is nothing within that could etch the face." He opened the main case, his practiced fingers probing the complex array of gears and springs. His brow furrowed, concern etching lines around his eyes. "The movement. It's immaculate," he finally stated, baffled. "Better than immaculate. There's virtually no wear. For a timepiece of this vintage, that's, well, it's simply not possible." He produced a jeweler's loop, leaning closer. "And these etches, they aren't random scrawls. There's a definite, repeating motif. See here." He indicated a swirling series of lines curling around the 14 hour and 20. This precise configuration appears 4 times around the dial. I leaned in, tracing the path he indicated. He was right. A geometric precision underlay the apparent chaos, a detail I'd missed. They looked newer than the ones from the morning. A knot tightened in my stomach. Mr. Abernathy continued his meticulous exploration, opening small access panels, checking components I hadn't known existed. After nearly an hour, he sat back on his heels, mopping his brow with a neatly folded handkerchief. 35 years, he sighed. His usual professional confidence evaporated, replaced by sheer bewilderment. 35 years tending to timekeepers, and I've encountered nothing remotely like this. Mechanically, she's flawless. Too flawless. These markings. He shook his head slowly. I cannot account for them. And there's something else. He reached carefully into the intricate brass heart of the mechanism and extracted a small, folded object. It was a square of parchment, yellowed and brittle with age, wedged improperly between 2 meshing gears. The paper bore the same cryptic sigils scratched onto the clock face. This was tucked away inside, Mr. Abernathy said, holding it out gingerly. It feels ancient, yet it cannot have been lodged there long. It would have jammed the entire works. I accepted the fragile square. The markings seemed to shimmer, to subtly shift as my eyes tried to focus on them. A dull throbbing began behind my temples. I quickly placed the parchment on the coffee table. Mr. Abernathy packed his instruments with uncharacteristic slowness. I cannot repair what isn't broken, he said, his gaze troubled. But my advice: consult someone else. Someone accustomed to the highly unusual. His departure left me alone with the ticking sentinel and the cryptic parchment. The rhythmic beat seemed amplified now, insistent, filling the quiet house. Despite the burgeoning headache, I picked up the paper again, compelling myself to study the strange glyphs. They sparked a flicker of familiarity, a half-remembered image from some forgotten book or dream, yet the connection remained elusive. The afternoon bled away in fruitless online searches for arcane horology and anomalous symbols. Nothing resonated. As dusk painted the windows purple, anxiety coiled tighter in my gut. The clock's ticking swelled, becoming the dominant sound, swallowing the house whole. By 11:57 p.m., I was prepared. A video camera perched on a tripod, its lens aimed squarely at the clock face. My phone lay nearby, set to record audio. I sat rigidly in my chair, watching through the camera's small screen as the minute hand crept inexorably toward 12. The familiar sequence commenced, the slowing rhythm, the palpable drop in temperature, the pendulum's erratic dance. But tonight, a new element emerged. As the second hand kissed midnight, the cryptic marks etched into the brass face began to pulse with a faint, ethereal blue luminescence. The low hum returned, deeper now, strangely modulated, almost like distorted speech. On the coffee table, the ancient parchment vibrated in sympathy, its own sigils glowing with the same eerie cerulean light. Then, abruptly, my camera died. My phone screen winked into blackness. The room plunged into absolute darkness, save for the luminous script glowing on the clock and the paper. The hum intensified, pressing against my eardrums, a physical weight. With a soft click, The clock's main case door swung open of its own accord. The pendulum hung utterly still, yet the space behind it seemed wrong. Deeper than physics allowed, an aperture into impossible blackness. The blue glow cast bizarre, elongated shadows that writhed independently of any light source. Raw instinct screamed at me to flee, but my limbs were leaden, held fast by an unseen force. The hum had become a tangible pressure against my skin. On the parchment, the glowing sigils rearranged themselves, flowing like liquid light into patterns my eyes struggled and failed to resolve. And just as suddenly, it ceased. The room lights flickered back to life. My electronics rebooted obediently. The clock resumed its placid ticking, its hands now indicating the correct time. 12:01 a.m. The unearthly glow vanished from both clock face and parchment, but the marks themselves had transformed. They now formed a stark, clear message in plain English. Time is not linear. The door is opening. The rest of that night dissolved into frantic research. Time anomalies, dimensional physics, portal theories. Nothing concrete surfaced, only whispers and fringe hypotheses. Yet a chilling coherence began to form. What afflicted my grandfather's clock transcended mere mechanical failure or haunting. It was something else. The following day, after several dismissive calls to university departments, I found a receptive ear. Dr. Eris Thorne, a physicist whose published work flirted with the theoretical edges of spacetime, agreed to investigate. She arrived that afternoon, brisk and focused, trailing a case brimming with sophisticated sensors. Hours passed as Dr. Thorne deployed her instruments, taking meticulous readings. Her devices registered peculiar energy fluctuations, localized around the clock, strongest near the enigmatic markings. A persistent thermal anomaly kept the air immediately surrounding the clock, a consistent 3 degrees colder than the rest of the room, defying even direct sunlight. The energy signatures are remarkable, she murmured, eyes glued to a complex graph on her tablet. A coherent pattern of electromagnetic disturbance, but it conforms to no known emission profile. And these inscriptions, she traced one gently. They aren't physical scratches. The material hasn't been displaced. It appears to have undergone molecular restructuring. As evening deepened, Dr. Thorne positioned more advanced monitoring equipment. Her focus narrowed on the impending midnight transition. At 11:57, the now familiar overture began. This time, her instruments captured the entire symphony. The precipitous temperature plunge, the escalating electromagnetic flux, the bizarre infrasonic frequencies. Precisely at midnight, the cerulean glow flared, but her sensors detected something far more profound. A distinct warping of space immediately before the clock, like ripples disturbing the surface of reality itself. Incredible, she breathed, awestruck, pointing at her fluctuating readings. These patterns, they mirror theoretical models of localized temporal distortion. It's as if the clock is generating a fold in time. The parchment on the table quivered violently. New glyphs blazed into existence upon it, and the clock face, coalescing into another chillingly lucid message. The convergence approaches. 3 days remain. Dr. Thorne's sensitive equipment simultaneously overloaded, then powered down. Silence fell, the room returning to a semblance of normalcy, yet the message remained, stark against the brass and parchment, promising to return with more robust, specialized gear. She departed swiftly, leaving me alone with the ticking clock and its 3-day ultimatum. Sleep offered no sanctuary. The clock's measured beats seemed to echo in my bones, pursuing me through the darkened house. The parchment lay on the table, its script seeming to squirm whenever I glanced away. Morning found me dialing my father in Florida. The clock's provenance suddenly felt critical. That old thing. Dad chuckled, his voice bright with sunshine. Granddad's treasure. Picked it up at some dusty estate sale back in '47. Never elaborated on its origins, but... Pause, a shift in tone. He had odd notions about it. Used to claim it helped him. See things. Glimpses in the pendulum swing, he said. We mostly humored him. Did it ever act strangely? Malfunction? Only once that I recall, Dad said slowly. A month before he passed. Called me. Frantic. Said the clock was trying to warn him. Show him something vital. Drove straight over. Found him agitated. The clock was ticking away. Perfectly normal. He never brought it up again. The call ended, leaving me adrift in a sea of unsettling implications. Dr. Thorne returned an hour later, armed with instruments that looked more suited to a particle accelerator lab than a living room. The day became a blur of complex measurements, rapid calculations exchanged over encrypted video calls with unseen colleagues. Overnight, the inscriptions on the clock face had proliferated, spreading like an intricate luminous mold across the entire dial. As midnight loomed, a tense anticipation filled the room. The sequence unfolded, but amplified. The blue glow pulsed with blinding intensity. The hum resonated deeper, imbued with a palpable urgency. The void behind the pendulum seemed to stretch, to breathe, swallowing the light. More glyphs materialized. 2 days until the paths align. The choice must be made. Dr. Thorne's new equipment held, capturing astonishing data. The spatial distortion intensified, forming what she breathlessly termed a contained temporal vortex, centered in the pendulum's anchor point. The temperature plummeted, frost blooming on the nearby window panes. The energy readings are exceeding theoretical maximums, she reported, her voice tight with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. These patterns align perfectly with models predicting significant time dilation. It's functioning as a bridge, a conduit between temporal dimensions. The penultimate day warped subjective experience. Time within the house felt elastic, unreliable. Watches refused to synchronize. Digital clocks flickered erratically. Objects near the grandfather clock vibrated with sympathetic resonance. Compasses brought within 10 feet spun uselessly. The hum emanating from the rosewood case became a constant thrumming presence, rattling the window frames, vibrating through the floorboards. That night's message was starker still. Tomorrow at midnight, the door opens. Step through or stay behind. Dr. Thorne's data indicated the temporal distortion was approaching critical instability. The space behind the pendulum now visibly pulsed, a living darkness contracting and expanding. The blue sigils on clock and parchment throbbed with light, even in the daytime glare. Whatever process this is, Dr. Thorne stated grimly, it's following a steep exponential curve. Midnight tomorrow represents a singularity point. The final day unfolded under a pall of profound strangeness. Reality felt thin, stretched taut. The constant hum of the clock was now interwoven with with faint, discordant harmonies. As midnight drew near, Dr. Thorne's instruments registered off-the-chart levels of temporal shear. The blue luminescence bathed the room in an otherworldly glow. The vortex behind the pendulum solidified, no longer just darkness, but a swirling aperture of fractured light and impossible geometries. At 11:59, the ultimate message blazed across the clock face. The choice is yours. Through the door lies a different path, a chance to explore what time truly means. Stay, and the door closes forever. The pendulum ceased its motion. The vortex stabilized into a shimmering doorway, radiating palpable energy. Through its swirling depths, I perceived not a place, but possibilities. Tangled pathways of causality, time flowing like braided rivers, vistas that defied Euclidean space. Dr. Thorne, though her instruments recorded frantically, stared transfixed at the portal. A stable, traversable temporal anomaly, she whispered, awe lacing her voice. The ramifications, they rewrite physics. I stood before the ancient clock, the vortex humming its siren song, exerting a tangible pull. The choice hung suspended in the charged air. Step into the unknown, into the heart of time itself, or remain tethered to the familiar world. The promise of infinite discovery warred with the anchor of my life, my family, my history, the generations bound to this very object. I thought of my father, my grandfather, their lives measured by this clock's steady beat. Choices made, paths taken, consequences lived. The final seconds bled away. The vortex pulsed, expectant. At the precise stroke of midnight, my decision crystallized. I reached forward, my hand steady, and firmly closed the clock's ornate case door. With a sound like the implosion of distant thunder, the vortex collapsed inward upon itself. The blue light vanished instantly. The intricate markings on the clock face and the ancient parchment evaporated, leaving surfaces smooth and unmarked, as if they had never existed. The pendulum stirred, resuming its steady, comforting swing. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Dr. Thorne's instruments registered a rapid decay of all anomalous readings, the energy signatures returning to baseline. She looked at me, a complex understanding dawning in her eyes. Perhaps, she said softly, the greatest discoveries aren't always out there. Sometimes they're about knowing where we belong. The Chronos keeps perfect time now. No more midnight pronouncements, no cryptic sigils, no shimmering doorways to other when. It stands sentinel in my living room, a testament to craftsmanship and inherited memory. Dr. Thorne eventually published a heavily anonymized paper detailing localized space-time perturbation phenomena associated with an antique horological device. It generated considerable debate within theoretical physics circles, though the event remains irreplicable, unexplained. She visits periodically, her instruments confirming the clock's stubborn normalcy. The parchment vanished that night as completely as the scratches. Yet, locked in my desk, lie my detailed notes, a tangible record I consult occasionally, reaffirming the reality of those impossible days. The grandfather clock remains, beautiful, silent, normal, mostly. But sometimes in the deepest hours of the night, when the house settles into profound quiet, I catch a fleeting distortion in the reflection on the polished glass door. A phantom flicker of cerulean light, perhaps. Or maybe just the ghost of a path untraveled. A quiet reminder of the time I chose to keep. The house stood on a bluff, overlooking the sluggish, brown curve of the river. An aging two-story sentinel in the quiet town of Aurelia. It was here I'd sought refuge, a place to anchor myself and let the current of work pull me under. The structure itself was worn, its bones solid beneath peeling paint and floors that sighed underfoot, a repository of forgotten years. Below waited a cellar, an uncommon feature that intrigued me. Perhaps a future workshop, or merely a crypt for the boxes I couldn't yet face. For those initial weeks, normalcy reigned. Unpacking became a ritual, furniture finding its place like chess pieces in a slow game. The cellar remained largely ignored, save for one trip to consign unopened cartons to its earthen-smelling depths. A place thick with the aroma of cold stone and time undisturbed. I dismissed the scent as the house's antique perfume. Then, silence fractured. Suspended in the velvet dark of my bedroom, hovering on the cusp of sleep, I heard it. A low, grating sound from the bowels of the house. It suggested friction, something coarse being dragged across the concrete below. I bolted upright, pulse leaping, ears straining against the sudden quiet that descended. The house settling, I told myself. Old plumbing groaning its nocturnal complaints. But the explanation felt thin, unsatisfying. And then, it returned. A soft, rhythmic abrasion, undeniably intentional, originating from the cellar. Bare feet met the cool, complaining wood of the stairs. Unease prickled my skin like static electricity. The descent through the darkened hallway was a cautious pilgrimage, guided only by the weak sodium glow spilling from the kitchen archway. A breath, held and released, did little to steady the tremor in my hands as I reached for the cellar door. The wave of damp subterranean air that met me was more potent than before, carrying a chill that sank deep into my bones. My fingers scrabbled, found the switch. A single, naked bulb flickered to life, casting a weak, jaundiced eye down the wooden steps. Anyone there? The question emerged as a thready whisper, swallowed instantly by the waiting hush. I stood frozen, a statue carved from apprehension, listening to the house's quiet respiration around me. Ridiculous. Imagination, amplified by solitude and the unfamiliar groans of an old structure. I retreated, pulling the door shut, the unease clinging like damp fabric. The following evening, it began again. I sat bathed in the television's flickering blue light when the sound wormed its way through the manufactured drama. That soft, insistent scraping from beneath the floorboards. I thumbed the volume to 0, every nerve alight. The same deliberate friction echoed upwards. My heart stuttered. Rising, my body coiled with tension. I drifted towards the cellar door. Hesitation seized me, my hand hovering inches from the tarnished knob, a primal instinct screaming retreat. Yet the not knowing was becoming its own kind of torment. The door swung inward, releasing that potent aroma of cold earth and decay, now almost cloying. I slapped the light switch, the weak bulb above the stairs struggling against the profound darkness below. Is someone down there? My voice wavered, fragile in the heavy air. Silence answered, profound and watchful. Taking a shuddering breath, I began the descent, each creak of the wooden treads amplifying in the stillness. At the bottom, the feeble light sketched long, dancing shadows on the rough walls. The cellar was as I remembered, my neglected boxes, spectral shapes of discarded furniture cloaked in dust. Yet standing there, scanning the gloom, a palpable coldness gathered at the base of my spine. The air felt thick, occupied. A sense of unseen presence lingered heavily in the shadowed corners. I backed away, step by cautious step, my pulse a frantic drummer behind my ribs. Upstairs, I slammed the door, the click of the lock echoing too loudly, sealing away a feeling I couldn't name, unsure if I was prey to fear or perception, knowing only that the solitude of the house felt suddenly, terribly compromised. In the nights that followed, the subterranean sounds intensified, diversified. The scraping persisted, but now it was joined by footsteps, a slow, heavy tread pacing the concrete floor below, and sometimes whispers, faint, sibilant murmurs that slithered just beyond comprehension, yet close enough to raise the fine hairs on my neck. Sleep became a besieged fortress. Lights blazed, doors were bolted, windows secured. It offered no defense. Night after night, the performance below continued. The grating drag, the measured footfalls, the insidious whispers. Night after night, I lay rigid in bed, heart hammering against my ribs, paralyzed by a dread that felt ancient and invasive. One moonless night, stretched taut by exhaustion and frayed nerves, I reached a breaking point. The gnawing uncertainty, the corrosive fear, it had to end. I needed to confront whatever lurked below, be it phantom or flesh. Flashlight clenched in a trembling fist, I navigated the sleeping house towards the cellar door. I stood before it, a supplicant at a dark altar, breath catching in my throat. Unlocking it felt like a betrayal of self-preservation. The door groaned open. My flashlight beam sliced into the waiting dark, the overhead bulb offering its usual pathetic contribution. Down I went, the protesting stairs marking my progress into the abyss. The beam swept across the familiar tableau. Boxes, furniture skeletons, bare walls, bleeding shadows. Then, my light snagged on an anomaly. Tucked in a far corner against the damp-stained foundation wall lay a patch of darkness upon the concrete floor. Not shadow, but substance. Drawn by a morbid curiosity that warred with rising panic, I approached. The flashlight illuminated the stain, dark, glistening, unnervingly fresh. Kneeling, my fingers hovering inches above it, a profound, visceral cold shot through me. The coppery tang hit my nostrils faintly. Blood. I scrambled backward, breath tearing from my lungs, the flashlight beam dancing wildly, probing every recess, every shadow-choked corner. Nothing. No one. Only the oppressive silence and the sickening stain. I fled up the stairs, the door slamming shut behind me, the lock clicking home like a final, desperate prayer. What resided in that cellar? What bled upon its floor? I couldn't fathom. Was my sanity framed, or had I stumbled into something truly monstrous? Questions clawed at me, but survival screamed louder. Keys, phone, essentials snatched in a blur. I burst out into the night, the house looming behind me, a silent, watchful entity. I drove, seeking refuge at Cassian's place, the terror a tangible thing beside me in the passenger seat. The story tumbled out, frantic and disjointed. He listened, his expression a mixture of concern and disbelief. It didn't matter. I knew the sounds I'd heard, the chilling evidence I'd found. daylight brought a fragile courage. With Cassian flanking me, we returned. We descended into the cellar, armed with brighter lights and grim determination, searching for any clue, any remnant of the nocturnal horror. But the concrete floor in the corner was clean, unstained, as if the blood had been nothing more than a waking nightmare. Weeks later, I moved, abandoning the house on the bluff, the oppressive weight of its unseen occupant too heavy to bear. The sounds, the presence, I carry their echoes still. I cannot say definitively what dwelled in the depths of that old house, reality or delusion. The question lingers, unanswered, but sometimes in the deep quiet of the night, when the world holds its breath, I hear it. A phantom scrape, like fingernails on stone. A whisper just beyond the veil of hearing, cold and close enough to make my skin crawl anew. That first evening, amidst the cardboard canyons of unpacked life, a dissonance settled into the quiet of my new house. Silas, I told myself, relax. But slumped on the unfamiliar sofa, the scent of cleanser still sharp from wiping down kitchen shelves, I became aware of it. A low, resonant thrum vibrating just at the edge of hearing. It wasn't mechanical, more organic, like a sub-vocal murmur, a thread of sound woven into the silence, emanating from the hallway's shadowed terminus. Barely audible, yet undeniably present. I stilled my movements, head cocked. The source seemed to be the final bedroom, the one left utterly bare, a blank canvas at the corridor's end. Its door stood ajar, framing darkness. The room itself was an empty receptacle of pale walls and a naked window pane. Logic dictated silence from such a void. Compelled, I rose. My socked feet whispered on the floorboards as I drifted down the hall. The murmur held steady, a consistent, almost meditative hum. But the instant my shadow fell across the threshold, the air stilled. Silence snapped back into place, absolute and unnerving. Nothing stirred within the vacant space. My gaze swept the corners, traced the ceiling line, lingered on the polished wood grain underfoot. Outside the window, the neighbor's picket fence stood stark under the dim glow filtering from distant streetlights. The only sound now was the familiar, mundane groan of the refrigerator cycling on back in the kitchen. Retreating to the living room, I tried to rationalize an errant frequency from next door, voices carrying on the night air. Yet scarcely 10 minutes had passed, the silence resettling around me, when the sound breathed anew. That same intimate low vibration, the ghost of a chant, repetitive and hushed, as if guarding a secret. This time, stealth guided my approach. The living room lamp cast long, dancing shadows down the unlit corridor. I moved with deliberate slowness, each step measured, trying to merge with the gloom. The humming persisted, a quiet pulse in the darkness. Closer, closer, until I reached the very edge of the doorway. It continued, clearer now, undeniably human in timbre. A calm, steady, low-pitched drone. I risked leaning, craning my neck to peer past the jamb without crossing the boundary. Empty. The window latched, the floor bare. One tentative step forward, my foot landing softly inside, and poof, vanished. A constellation of goose flesh bloomed along my arms. A cool film of sweat misted my brow. This defied explanation. The house, though possessing age, wasn't dilapidated. Recent renovations, the landlord had assured me, had tightened its bones. The walls felt solid, Thick. No obvious cracks. No vents through which a whisper might snake. I checked the adjacent empty bedroom, peered into its shallow closet, knelt by its window, pressed my ear to the dividing wall. Stillness. That night, sleep offered a troubled refuge behind my closed bedroom door, strategically positioned near the kitchen, far from the corridor's end. I strained my ears against the pillow, anticipating the murmur's return, but exhaustion eventually claimed me. Daylight painted the house in normalcy. I immersed myself in the ritual of setting up my workspace, the click of the keyboard and the whir of the computer fan filling the air. The neighborhood drowsed peacefully. Birdsong stitched the quiet, punctuated by the distant yelp of a dog. Several times I found myself drawn back to the problematic room. By day, it was aggressively ordinary. White walls, a window overlooking the tidy front lawn, unadorned wooden floors, no hidden compartments, no loose boards. I rapped knuckles against the plaster, solid, unremarkable. Evening descended, and with it, a returning tension. After a solitary dinner, I settled in the living room, deliberately leaving the far bedroom door open. I switched off the television, inviting the silence, waiting. An hour crawled by before the familiar vibration seeped back into the atmosphere. A low, unwavering hum, wordless yet voiced, flowing from that room. My pulse quickened, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. Slowly, I rose. This time, I didn't aim directly for the door, but skirted the edge of the hallway, stepping with feather-light care, determined to observe it undetected. Closer. The sound held. I reached the frame, hearing it with startling clarity. A serene, deep hum. I risked another lean, peering into the unlit space. Barren. Empty. Then the slightest shift of weight, a foot crossing the invisible line. Instantaneous silence. The hairs on my forearms prickled upright. Again, the futile check behind the door, the scan of the ceiling, the brief opening of the window onto the quiet street, parked cars slumbering under the jaundiced glow of a single porch light across the way. Nothing. An idea sparked. My phone. I launched its recording app, waited for the inevitable return of the sound. 30 minutes, perhaps. There it was. Recording active, I held the phone outstretched like a divining rod and crept forward once more. The hum persisted, a steady tone in the darkness, until the precise moment my hand, holding the phone, breached the doorway. Silence. Playback yielded only the sibilance of my own anxious breathing, the ambient hiss of an empty house, not a trace of the hum. A frustrated curse escaped my lips. Tension coiled in my neck. I paced the hallway, flicking the overhead light on, off, on again, as if interrogating the space itself. Lingering just outside the doorway proved fruitless. The sound remained dormant. It seemed to require my distance, my perceived inattention in the living room or kitchen. A new strategy formed that night. I placed my phone, recording app engaged, deep within the empty room before retreating to my own bedroom, closing the door. An hour later, I returned. Listening intently at the threshold revealed nothing. Inside, silence reigned. Retrieving the phone, I scrutinized the recording. There, buried midway through the file, was a faint, fleeting thrum. perhaps 3 seconds long, barely discernible, cutting off abruptly. No identifiable pitch or gender, just a whisper of the familiar vibration. Replaying it offered no further clarity. Unease became my unwelcome housemate over the ensuing days. Evenings felt charged. The hallway became a territory I navigated with reluctance. Music became a shield, headphones a refuge. Yet, curiosity gnawed. In moments of quiet, turning off the stereo or muting the television, the hum would invariably surface, a persistent reminder from the vacant room. I tried rapping sharply on the hallway wall during one of its performances. Immediate cessation. I tried calling out, "Is anyone there?" Only the echo of my own voice answered. The attic yielded nothing but insulation and dust motes dancing in the flashlight beam. The crawl space beneath the house offered only cobwebs and aging pipes. A stepladder allowed a meticulous inspection of the bedroom ceiling. No vents, no hidden speakers, simple wiring. The window frame was tight, the closet shallow and featureless. Sleep became dependent on the drone of the television in my room. Sometimes driven by a perverse need to know, I'd lower the volume late at night. Always, eventually, the low hum would filter through, unchanged, unwavering, until the moment of approach. Another experiment. An old, cheap baby monitor set, unearthed from a box of forgotten gadgets. I placed the transmitter inside the empty room, the receiver beside me in the living area. Static hissed for a long while. Then, faintly at first, growing clearer, the humming emerged through the speaker. It seemed more defined now, almost melodic. A short sequence of notes repeated. Clutching the receiver, I rushed down the hallway. The sound died through the speaker yards before I reached the room. The transmitter sat undisturbed. Anxiety began to fray my edges. Appetite waned. Fatigue became a constant companion. The thought of calling the landlord felt absurd. How to explain a phantom hum that vanished upon investigation? Explaining it to a friend felt equally impossible, tinged with embarrassment and a reluctance to inflict this strangeness on anyone else. One desperate night, I resolved to confront it directly. I laid a sleeping bag on the bare wooden floor of the empty room, switched off all lights, and lay in the absolute darkness, waiting. The house settled into profound quiet. Time stretched. Just as drowsiness began to soften my vigilance, I heard it. Distant now, oddly displaced, as if originating from elsewhere in the house, yet unmistakably the same resonant hum. I sat bolt upright, instant silence. Heart hammering, skin clammy with cold sweat. I waited, breathing in the faint scent of dust and old wood. The room felt colder than the rest of the house. Hours passed in watchful stillness, but the sound did not return as long as I remained within those four walls. The following day left me hollowed out, consumed by a simmering anger and frustration. I stood in the center of the room and spoke aloud, addressing the empty air, pleading for peace, stating my harmless intentions. Silence was my only reply. The room remained stubbornly itself, bare, quiet, inanimate. 2 weeks dissolved into this unsettling rhythm. I borrowed an antiquated handheld tape recorder from a friend, hoping its analog nature might capture what my phone could not. Positioned in the hallway just outside the room, it recorded continuously while I waited in the living room's dim light. The humming began audible from my seat. After letting it establish itself for several minutes, I crept forward, inching the recorder closer. Near the doorway, it ceased. The tape revealed only a few tantalizing, faint seconds of the sound before falling silent. I tried standing outside in the yard late at night, the empty room's window deliberately left open, straining to hear. Nothing. Only when I returned inside, settling back into the house's main living space, did the spectral humming resume. It was intrinsically internal, bound to that specific room, yet shy of direct observation. A stalemate. Moving again felt unthinkable. The deposits paid, the utilities connected, the sheer exhaustion of settling in. Yet the quiet evenings in the living room became unbearable. I spent more time cloistered in my bedroom, cocooned in music. Still, the puzzle of it hooked me. One evening, I attempted a commando-style approach from the kitchen side, moving low, hugging the walls, trying to remain unseen. The humming held until the very instant my eye cleared the doorframe. Silence. The jolt of it never lessened. Each encounter left my heart pounding, palms slick, breath shallow. Putting furniture in the room, claiming it for storage or guests, felt strangely violating, unsettling. The idea of arranging shelves or making a bed, while that unseen presence might hum and cease, just beyond my perception, induced a visceral discomfort. Earplugs became a nightly necessity, supplemented by the white noise of a fan. Some nights, oblivion was achievable. Others, the urge to know, to understand, would propel me out into the hallway, only to replay the same frustrating pattern. Hum from afar, silence upon approach. No source was ever uncovered, no hidden device, no structural anomaly, no spectral figure glimpsed in the periphery. My challenges, if someone is there, say something, met only with the humming's eventual return once I retreated. Shining a flashlight beam into the room from a distance revealed only empty space. Placing a chair inside, facing the door, a silent sentinel, changed nothing. Eventually, exhaustion bred a strange truce. I learned to live around the phenomenon. Quiet evenings were spent elsewhere, often driving aimlessly after dark simply to escape the oppressive tension. Upon returning late, I'd head straight for my bedroom sanctuary. Mornings always brought a fragile sense of normalcy, the empty room reverting to its blank state. 4 white walls, a window, a wooden floor, devoid of any strangeness. To this day, the humming persists, an intermittent resident. I never caught it. It remains meticulously elusive, falling silent the instant proximity threatens exposure. It never intensifies, never alters its low, steady pitch. Just a quiet vibration from an empty room, ceasing the moment I cross the threshold. I reside here still. Explanations have been abandoned. I simply maintain my distance, navigating the quiet hum that shares my home. There seems little else to do.